Hello, friends. Guess what? Today we are starting the first of many conversations titled Tell Me More. When you ask someone to tell you more, it's an invitation for them to share themselves with you and show you who they are. And so I can't imagine having our very first conversation with a wellspring of information, a very dear friend and colleague of mine, Christina Spencer. You met her on the virtual tour. She's a writer, she's a parent coach, and she holds a degree in gender studies. And what a wellspring you are, Christina. Welcome.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me. I am so excited to be here today. It just is a really wonderful opportunity to connect with parents and friends of the transgender community and hopefully be of service in any way that I can be.
I love it. I love it. I'm so excited to, number one, for our friends to meet you and to learn about the basics, because I was in my 40s before I started hearing words like gender identity, sexual orientation, things like that. Who knew that was even a thing, right? And today we're talking about the transgender community. I want you to share in just a minute how you got involved, what brings you here. But I want to set the stage here is that when I first met the transgender community, it was when I went to a meeting that I thought was for families like mine with high schoolers. And though my son is not transgender, it turned out to be a meeting for the transgender adult community. And that was the first time I'd ever been in a room with a transgender person that I know of. And I stayed and I heard their stories, and I left that day thinking these are beautiful, misunderstood people. And since that day, I've done everything that I can to advocate and be a good and faithful ally. But in addition to that, guess what? I started seeing transgender people everywhere, at the bus stop, at the grocery store. So on this particular conversation, I want to ask Christina, Katrina's over there, that to help us with the basics, because we have parents with transgender children with free mom hugs, and we're hearing a lot from the community and their parents that help us to understand the basics like gender. I want to talk about gender dysphoria, gender identity, and sex assigned at birth. Now, Christina, can you tell us, Cole is your child, transgender. Did they experience gender dysphoria, or what was that like?
That's such a good question, because gender dysphoria for me as a parent was a huge stumbling block. I was a mom who gave birth to 3 female-bodied kiddos, and one of them was just very different. One of them wanted to wear pants and wanted to play with the boys and wanted to do rough and tumble play and wanted to do Legos. And from my gender studies experience, I had been trained that this was a social preference, and I just celebrated that I had a kid who was breaking the mold and, being a different kind of girl. That's what I thought was going on, that my child was being a different kind of girl. That said, my little guy did have some anxiety, and so I'd gone to a psychologist to see if there were things that I could do to help him. And she said to me, well, he might have gender dysphoria. Your child might have gender dysphoria. And when I heard that, I was sort of surprised. Even though I had studied gender, that was a word that still felt very clinical, very pathological, like an illness. And I didn't have a child who I saw as ill, and I didn't have a child who I thought had anything wrong with them. I thought I just had sort of, in that traditional word, kind of a tomboy. That's what I thought was going on. But let me give you the official definition of gender dysphoria, or an official definition of gender dysphoria, a clear one. Gender dysphoria is the feeling of distress that might occur in people whose gender identity differs from their sex assigned at birth. Let me do that one again. The feeling of distress that might occur in people whose gender identity differs from their sex assigned at birth. It's actually a lot to unpack. So as a parent, I didn't see my kid's gender giving him much distress. I just didn't see a lot of distress, and I thought my kid definitely doesn't have this. I thought he was a little anxious, having trouble sleeping at night, but I didn't think like, oh, my kid is in distress.
Stress.
And so I really resisted this definition for a while. And I think it's not uncommon, especially for children who are born female, who want to dress up and be boyish. We have a lot more social acceptance for boyish style girls than we do for girlish style boys, right?
Mm.
It's a lot easier to see a little, it's a lot easier for many people to see a little girl in jeans and with a little pixie haircut and, you know, baseball shirt maybe, than it is to, it's less comfortable for most people to see a little boy wearing a skirt and
Mhm.
a princess crown and giving himself the long hair, like kids are prone to do when they play.
Mm.
You know, my kiddo did not have that feeling of distress about their gender until puberty.
Okay.
It's that feeling of distress that leads to this diagnosis of gender dysphoria. And the diagnosis of gender dysphoria is what lots of kiddos who are going to grow up and be transgender receive in order to get their health insurance benefits.
I see.
But
So-
if we go back to the definition, there are a couple words in there that we really need to cover. One is gender identity, and one is sex assigned at birth.
Let's talk about that. Gender identity. I identify as female. You see my pronouns listed here, she, her. I
Yeah.
have always felt like a woman, very
Yeah.
feminine. Well, I mean, I guess I could be a little tomboyish too, but regardless, I've always felt like a woman. I could not imagine what it would feel like to see myself or feel differently on the inside than I look on the outside.
Exactly, because gender identity is the deep felt sense of our own gender that comes from the inside. And
I like that.
people whose deep felt sense of their own gender aligns or is congruent with the sex that a doctor said they were when they were born, their sex assigned at birth.
Interesting.
When those two things are the same, there's a certain harmony that exists in body, mind, and spirit.
Oh, I love that picture. You just painted a harmony.
Of body, mind, and spirit. And this is what we want for everyone, is harmony of body, mind, and spirit. And for people who have never felt incongruence or like a divergence from how they feel inside and who people say they are on the outside, it's really, really hard to imagine what that kind of distress would be of gender dysphoria. That gender dysphoria distress is really hard to wrap our heads around if we've always had this like deep alignment, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I love that you use the word harmony, and it would be distressing if you didn't feel, grounded.
Yes.
So that's what we're here for, to educate, because you and I both agree, moms learn from other moms.
Yeah.
And education is the key. And so,
I think what you would find, so, the third term that we really want to cover today is sex assigned at birth.
yes.
So that is like the baby comes out of the mom and the doctor looks at between the legs of the baby and says, it's a boy, it's a girl, and says based on the genitals, if they see a penis or a vagina,
Right.
that it's a boy or a girl. Now, we also not always that clear. There is a whole community of people that are intersex, that when the child comes
Right.
out of the mother, the doctor actually looks at the genitals and doesn't know, can't tell, can't discern if it's a penis or a vagina.
Right.
Those are intersex. That's our intersex community. And it's actually from that community and that experience that we get this term of assigned at birth. Because really the doctor at that point looks at a child's genitals and picks, is this going to be a boy or a girl?
Mhm.
And that clinical best practice is changing. It's more and more common for gender to be assigned later in life for intersex children now. But by tradition, clinical tradition was that the doctor always got to say, is this a boy? Is this a girl?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's how we get the term sex assigned at birth.
Yeah. One thing I have learned is that I don't assume anything. because people really do need to allow people to show us who they are. And it's through the education, like doctors, just having, being educated on just not to change that social norm. And,
yeah. And I think the experience of having the outside world tell you that you are a boy or a girl, and deeply feeling on the inside that what you're being told is not true for you, that can cause a lot of distress, especially as people's bodies change into adult bodies. That is, especially as puberty comes on for kids. And that's one of the first, people can present gender dysphoria at any time in their lives. They could have it as children, they could have it as middle schoolers, they could have it as adults. Gender dysphoria is the experience that someone has that would lead them to a clinic to be treated with hormones or surgeries to bring that body and mind and spirit into alignment. That you have gender dysphoria is when the inside and outside feel very, very different, and that causes a lot of different kinds of distress. And then gender congruence is when the body, mind, and spirit is aligned. And that occurs for most of us from day one. Some people need medical treatment to get to that sense of harmony. I
love that. The goal is harmony.
Yes.
So what could you give us as tips or strategies that will help parents who may be just entering into this journey, or you have an older, people coming out later in life? What can we do as allies to help?
I think my first place to start, that I always send all my coaching clients and parent friends who are wondering about gender and their kids and things like that, I always send people to Gender Spectrum. It's a national organization that specializes in educating schools, workplaces, community organizations about gender diversity. If you look up Gender Spectrum on Google, and if you click on the link Understanding Gender, that is a wonderful place to start if you have more questions about gender identity and gender dysphoria.
I love that. So did we cover all the bases, you feel?
I think we did. We got gender dysphoria, the feeling of distress that might occur or can occur in people whose gender identity differs from their sex assigned at birth. We got gender identity, which is a deep felt sense of one's own gender. And the sex assigned at birth is what the doctor said when you came out of your mom's belly.
I love that. And one more thing I wanted to ask you about, I almost forgot, is non-binary. What is that, the definition for that?
Yeah, so non-binary is a term that comes from rejecting the concept of binary gender, either or, male or female. Non-binary gender is any gender that is not male or female. And we can have a whole other conversation about non-binary because it's a bit complicated, and I hope we have it.
Well, guess what? We're going to have it. So
awesome.
Thank you for these nuggets of truth, of information, and what a wellspring you are. And I look forward to the next time already. And parents, if you're just tuning in, we would love to hear from you. If you want to send any questions you might have, either leave them in the comments below, or you can direct message Free Mom Hugs, and they'll make sure that we get it, or go to freemomhugs.org and you can email. We'll figure it out. But
yeah, we'll get those questions answered. We are excited to hear from you.
Yes, and until then, allow your children to show you who they are, and celebrate your children, celebrate your friends and family, and let's just together make this world a better place for everyone. Now we'll end with a group hug.
Hug.
Ready? Bring it in.
Oh, I love it.
I love you. Thanks, Christina.
Love you too, Sarah. Bye.
Bye.